Two unemployed actors, two unemployed actors. They're just between projects.
Welcome back to Two Unemployed Actors. I'm Max.
I'm Sam.
Today we are in the company of an award-winning actor, NIDA alumni, teacher of improv, Shakespeare and comedy, Darren Gilshenan. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, guys. Nice to be here.
Full disclosure, I actually participated in a Darren Gilshenan comedy masterclass and survived with only moderate amounts of therapy required. It was pretty good.
One of the lucky ones.
One of the lucky ones. And when you're creating a character, Darren, comedic or otherwise, how is it that do you have a sort of a process for getting into the headspace of the character?
Oh, yeah, I have a few processes, actually. It depends on how far the character is away from me, I guess. I find that all characters really come very much from story or from text, so a really healthy sense of linear work and getting any bit of information you can from the text. But then when you're building the character, I've got a couple of processes that I kind of like to use. I used them a lot when I did a lot of theatre. One of them is a Rowena Balos voice exercise, the 9 different vocal resonators. And the other one is using Laban, Rudolf Laban, the 8 physical efforts. I find that those particular kind of physical and vocal ideas, if you're doing a role, that's on for, 150 performances. I did a lot of touring, so sometimes you get halfway through the run and kind of think, who the hell is this guy again? So if you've got all these processes written down, really specific launching points and cornerstones that you can kind of tie your character to, it's easy to kind of hang on to the integrity of the character.
So what might be working really well in the first few performances, you might discard and be doing something completely different to sort of get into that headspace towards the end of the run?
Yeah, I just think the more familiar you get with stuff, you kind of learn, you kind of forget to learn again, everything evolves, everything's always changing. And I think in performance, your head always has to be on the audience. They're seeing it for the first time, they're hearing it for the first time. So you might be enjoying going, I'm tangentializing with this particular choice here and quite enjoying where I'm going. But it might just be, a few degrees away from your initial instincts of where the choice should be. So I think always kind of pulling yourself back. I think it's great to have directors in theatre come in, say 4 weeks into a run, look at the show, pull everyone back again, tighten the screws, remind everyone to listen and watch and play character from character's point of view, particularly in comedy, because comedy, we get seduced by the laughter and we can become a bit of a slut for a laugh. So if that starts to become the primary focus, and actors come off stage going, God, they're not as good as they were last night, or they hate me tonight, or those kind of bullshit actor ego comments, then we really have our focus in the wrong place. So, having cornerstones or specific things, particularly if you've got 2 characters together and it's very important that one's the straight character and one's the clown. If the actor playing the straight character starts to get seduced by the fact that they can find some laughs as well and they don't trust the dynamic between the 2 characters, then we suddenly have 2 clowns in a room, which means we have no consequence, which means we may as well be in an insane asylum because the world doesn't have any rules.
Yeah. So do you approach comedy differently than you do drama? And if so, how, in what ways do you do that?
Yeah, comedy for me is a much more complex form. It's often seen as the poor cousin to drama when it comes to the great acting. But there's so many styles of comedy, from Commedia and Farce, Melodrama, there's character comedy, satire, there's vaudeville, there's panto, there's really so many different, spokes to the comedy wheel. And comedy is very strategic and it's very, it's moment by moment and it's with an audience. So it requires you to to be really, really present with it, and with that crowd. If that laugh didn't work the way it did last night, just being able to strategize, recalibrate, and kind of make sure you don't kind of hit the panic button and get desperate for a laugh and start pushing.
Yeah.
So I think that constructing it requires a lot more communal, collaborative thinking. As a group, you really need to come together and have a lot of kind of bullshit conversations about where the joke is, what's working, what's not, how we serve each other. Whereas I think drama, you can kind of go in it a little bit by yourself, particularly in television. I think you can kind of work your stuff out in front of your mirror and go in there and play your beats. Whereas comedy, you really need to negotiate. You really need to sit down and work it out together. And that's hard.
Do you find certainly comedy to drama has a different sort of rhythm to it, and different types of comedy have different rhythms and that
Oh,
sort
yeah.
of, yeah.
Oh, yeah. I mean, like if you're doing farce, farce is life amplified. Life accelerated. Whereas melodrama is life amplified. So melodrama is kind of extending into the emotional content within the piece and exaggerating that aspect. Whereas if you're doing farce or something that is classified as a farce, it's really about kind of rehearsing it in detail and then tightening it and running it quickly. Commedia is a highly physical art form where it has to get into your toes and your feet. Character-based comedy or cringe comedy, that Ricky Gervais kind of gave us through The Office is all internalized, and it's kind of the jokes really in the pauses and the horrid thoughts that you're having. It's all. So each art form kind of presents different styles of performance, I guess, and what you want to do is make sure that your team or your troupe is all on the same page when it comes to that style, and then there'll be a chance of having a sense of cohesiveness in a production.
Is there one that you sort of gravitate to more naturally than others, or one that you find you have to work a lot harder at?
I've always liked very physical art forms. I used to run into doors for a joke all the time, and I did a lot of acrobatics, and so I've always loved Commedia because Commedia has such great physical attack, and I love farce. But, I really love character comedy. I really love bent, twisted, vulnerable, flawed comic characters as well.
They're so relatable.
Pardon?
They're so relatable.
Yeah, well, they say comedy is kind of who we are and tragedy, well, drama is who we'd like to be. And who we are is broken and flawed and uncertain and awkward and all these things. And the comedy is really about putting a spotlight on all the stuff inside that doesn't work. So if you kind of find that healthy sense of what's the problems, where are the dilemmas on the inside, and the desperate external attempt to try to cover that shit up, then you've got a funny character,
Yeah, I studied some comedy at school as well, and you teach comedy. So what's the I guess the main mistake you see up and coming actors make when they're trying to take on comedy and perform comedy?
I would say the number one pitfall would be trying to be funny. I think if someone walks into the space and they've got the white hat of comedy on with a cheeky smile on their face, straight away as an audience, I tend to sit back and think you're a bit up yourself. Whereas I think the real place to shoot from is you bring that character into the space, and you want to get the audience to empathize with your dilemma as soon as possible. So your dilemma is your problems, So it comes from a dramatic place, a place of desperation or great need or great loss, or they're innately dramatic ideas. And you bring the audience into alignment with empathizing with your character's problems. And then the playwright or the screenwriter puts you in a situation where, suddenly you're up against these problems. And we can then start to laugh. I think comedy is behavioral. We kind of laugh at what a character will do to get out of a desperate situation rather than kind of thinking I'm funny. So you kind of need a duplicit brain when you perform. One is very much performing from character's point of view and playing that character, but the other side is the actor's brain is aware you're in a comedy. So therefore, your behaviours that you push past the limits of what would be normal or socially acceptable, the actor's brain is going, yeah, go for this, push that, really make that want really grand. Just, and if the audience starts to swallow it and you hear them laughing and respond, then you know that way goes the game. Kind of go for it. Just pull up short before you start milking the gag, so to speak. Yeah.
I saw you on stage with the Sydney Theatre Company in Machu Picchu with Lisa McClune.
Oh, yes.
A great little drama, and I did really enjoy the fact that it was a really small, sort of intimate space, and like I was down. I got lucky with my tickets. I was down in the front row, and it really felt like you guys were just talking to me and just speaking to me in that piece, and it's such a great dramatic piece. I always remember that. Do you prefer the stage to the screen? You've certainly got a breadth of experience across both worlds.
They both offer different things, Max. I think the stage is so immediate. Like you really feel that audience. You really feel that sense of a moment resonating in space. You feel the silences as much as you feel the laughters, depending on what you're doing. And there's something very, it's like a ceremony, it's something kind of really special about it. And that's never been lost on me. When you walk out and you can galvanize a group of people and all sitting there in the dark, and you're all sharing one idea at one moment, and the fact that everyone can tap into that humanity and what's going on inside a character, that's a beautiful and amazing experience. Whereas, the film and TV it's a different set of kind of things. There's so much to think about, technically, and it's kind of fun being able to pick off all that technique, whether it's continuity or whether it's, really fast line changes or whether it's multiple setups or, it's all so freshly in you when you do television that you really are. It feels as though you're almost improvising. Whereas theatre, it's so well drilled. You get 4 weeks to really dig down in a character until you feel all the aspects of that character, and you get to explore doing that one performance over and over again. So you find all the different kind of nuances within that character. Whereas television, it's just instinct, You've got the script, it's new, the character's new. Unless you're in a long-running show, I guess, where, like when I did Harrow up here in Queensland for 3 seasons, you get to a place with a character where you just look at it and you kind of know, I know exactly how this character would say this or be within this situation. Whereas, when you're doing guest roles, I often say when I teach acting, that's the hardest job in the world, walking onto a cold set with a group of regulars who are in the skin of their characters, and you're coming on as, this character that you've not even practiced with anyone, just in your bathroom by yourself, and coming up against people who are match fit, who have been possibly shooting for 2 or 3 months, maybe longer. Hard job. But, you got to back yourself and do your homework before you get in there. And film, again, it's slower. It's, 3 minutes a day, multiple takes, plenty of opportunity to warm into a performance. You can roll on a shit performance, and by the end of the day, it's become great just by kind of tuning it and finding each time you have a go at it, it's different things happen. Whereas television, you kind of got to get it right in 2 takes in Australia anyway, because that's all we have time for. So you kind of got to get it right really quickly. Film something that you can have more goes at.
Yeah, I started in theatre and slowly progressed to screen as well, and they almost feel like 2 separate crafts in a sense. They're completely different, and I do similar to you. I enjoy it. Almost like in theatre, once you understand your character so much, you have kind of the space to improvise, especially on different nights as well, because there is no real continuity, unless there's a significant I don't know, prop needed in one scene or whatever. But yeah, they're exciting in different ways, and they're difficult in different ways. All that stuff, 100%.
Yeah, they all. I mean, television pays a lot better than theatre. It's very seductive to earn a lot of money sitting in a trailer, having a little sleep in the middle of the day, kind of thinking, oh shit, Whereas film and television, theatre, you've got to slave it out 8 shows a week. Yeah. So it's got to be something you really like,
Yeah. Yeah, TV and film, a lot more waiting. Yeah.
Oh yeah, and but there's all the food, and someone does your hair and makeup, and someone hangs up your clothes, and it's just like
you have
ridiculous.
to do all that yourself in theatre.
Yeah, of course. You bet. Most of the time you're going without food.
When I told my mum, Darren, that I'm leaving corporate after 20 years, coming back into acting, the first thing she said was, "Well, you always did like the food." So it was certainly more important for some than others. But
it's great on sets, like when you're in a television and film sets, you get that big spread in the morning, you get congee, stuff that you'd never make yourself.
Great fun. Look, you've studied the classics, and you're a part of Bell Shakespeare Company for many years. Was that an opportunity for you to learn finer points of comedy performing, or even try comedy that you're familiar with in different ways?
Yeah, I did 10 years with the Bell Company, and John Bell, who I consider my mentor, taught me so much about the power of language. And but the characters, I played the clown in a lot of the shows we did, and really got quite an intimate knowledge of the journey of the clowns through Shakespeare's canon. From Shakespeare's King's Players, there were three actors that had played all the clowns through the canon. Richard Tarleton, Will Kemp, and Robert Armin, and they're all very different kind of clowns. The first one was kind of a musical, physical acrobat, lots of ditties and lots of kind of silly kind of dancing and madrigal style stuff. And the second one, Will Kemp, was an improviser and used to go off script and play with the audience, and you can see that in certain characters within the canon, like the Comedy of Errors and Taming of the Shrew, and then the third one, Robert Armin, was like a poet and orator. So you had those kind of great clowns of Feste and the Fool from King Lear. They're those really dark, cerebral, kind of tortured clowns that aren't particularly funny, but they're more witty. So I got to experience, I guess, the broad versions of the clowning. So that was interesting for me. So much so I then went and wrote a solo show called Fool's Island, which was an exploration of only using Shakespeare words, but it was basically a guy trapped on a deserted island going mad. But he thought there were two people there. One was the good side of his personality, called Gooden, and one was the evil side of his personality, called Baden. So I just was exploring the great swing between the hopeful and the tortured aspects of Shakespearean characters. But yeah, look, it's amazing. Shakespeare's amazing. You can go out there night after night and still find stuff in it. It's impenetrable for me. When I first read it, I just kind of look at it and kind of get a bit of story. But the more you work on it and the more you get into it, the more the genius comes out to you, and it's very giving. It's a very giving art form to work on.
And you're a skilled improv performer as well, as we know, and you starred in No Activity with Patrick Bremel, which was mostly improvised. What was that process like with a mostly improvised performance?
Yeah, that was fascinating because we didn't have really we had like a paragraph of a starting place for our characters. So my character Stokes I seem to remember it was said something like, yeah, he's towards the end of his career. He's bored. He doesn't want to do anything that kind of gets him into too much trouble. He wants to sail through and take the easy bus. He's in a loveless marriage with this woman who had a pilot husband who died in an accident, and I had to go over and tell her, and she cried on my shoulder, and I never left, kind of thing. And so that was kind of the starting points. But the day to day, we shot all the first series in like 10 days or something, and I think Paddy and I were in a car for 4 days for about 10 hours a day with 2 cameras either side, and one camera traveling backwards and forwards between singles across the bonnet, and then 1 2-shot. And we just started, we just had all these starting points, like the Larry David process, and from Curb Your Enthusiasm. And Trent O'Donnell, the director, who's just a master, he sat behind the monitor with the headphones on, and just, we'd launch into something, and we'd get maybe 20 minutes into an improv, and he'd just pull us up and go back now, change this, flip that, extend that. And somehow or other, he kept all these, hours and hours of what people say when they're bored to one another in his head and in the edit, and put it together, and he stitched it together really neatly through the radio, through this idea that we're on this stakeout, on this big drug deal. That was the linchpin for it. But all the scenes between Paddy and I and Harriet and Jen in the radio dispatch, and Dave and Dan were, the 2 criminals would just jump. It was the same thing for all of us. They just jumped between them. But Paddy and I would get into situations where we get ourselves into such dark holes because we're just like alone in this warehouse with these big screens around the car, with video projections on them, and we'd just go. You go so dark into your psyche. And because you couldn't hear anyone, it was just us in a car, you're espousing the joys of a pedophile joke or something, like it was so wrong town. And, we'd even stop. Sometimes we just keep pushing each other going, how dark can we go? Or how private can we go? And then we get to stages where we just pause and then just look at each other and burst out laughing and go, this will never make it in. And funny enough, a lot of that stuff made it in. And then there's all these special features that after the actual show, which is all this other stuff that didn't make it in. So, but you're creating your character as you're speaking. So, I often tell the story when I teach comedy, but at one stage we were doing a scene about me, a dog that had been run over, and this old man's dog, and I helped him bury it and ended up in a spa tub with him somehow. And Patty said, what are you doing? You're in the tub. I still had you with your clothes on. And I said, no, I said I got in the pub. In the tub, I said I was in my undies. He said, what are you doing in your undies? I still had you with your clothes on. And I said, well, no, they were my church pants. I didn't want to get them wet. And so suddenly my character is religious. And so a lot of what we did within the impros, we kind of reverse geared our characters. So by the time we got to the second series, we had characters, whereas the first series, the characters were created through the improvisations, and then we kind of had to hang on to those ideas as we went further into the experience. Yeah, it was fascinating.
Cool.
Yeah.
Do you think there's a golden rule for improv?
Well, improv has been hijacked a bit, by competitive gaming, theatre sports and whose line is it ever, anyway, and all that stuff. For me, I like long form improv, like 50-minute impros, because you really get a chance to introduce a whole lot of scenes and then push along some characters, and bit by bit you look for some connections, and ultimately, hopefully, it comes home and there's some kind of resolve. But I don't like having to be funny, or having to compete to be funny, because I find that my focus goes straight on to trying to structurally, build stuff into it rather than just be there for the other actor. And I think improv is all about flow, And so by actively watching and actively listening, you don't really need anything. You just need the other person. And if you're really kind of looking towards each other, it's just like a normal conversation, really. If you're just open and you're not sitting there thinking about your own agenda, then improv can happen quite easily. So I think that the main thing would be don't make your decisions before you hit the floor about anything. Just walk in and maybe just have a starting point or one little offer. I think offers, of course, these are all the words they teach you when you do improv. Don't block, that means don't shut anyone down. But offers are good because offers are just statements, to come in and throw something on your other scene partner and go, wow, those cycling pants are looking really hot. Then the person's got something to work with. Whereas if you come in and go, what are you wearing? Then the other person gets to make their decision up themselves. I think it's funny if you come in and say, when my grandmother wore those, she looked really bad, but you look amazing. And then the person can go, well, what can I do with that thought? And then particularly for the audience that's watching it, is you're watching the other actor who just listened to a ridiculous idea that was just jammed on them, and they've got to find a way now to kind of make that work. And that's when improv is really fun, rather than someone coming in trying to dominate or railroad or structure or build a story or push towards what they think. I think the mistakes are the best thing, when someone comes in and mispronounces a word, or some of the best improv I saw over in LA, Second City, and the Groundlings particularly, just mistakes that just got explored to extreme detail when someone would mispronounce a word or just kind of half form a thought that didn't quite make sense, and the other actor would just leap onto it. That's the fun stuff, the broken stuff. As long as you're listening and watching, and and you're not having your eyeballs roll backwards in your head and getting all self-obsessed.
Yeah. Yeah, I know that I find pure improv super daunting, me personally. I think I like having a script and having kind of a reasonably full-on idea about what character I'm playing, and then once I get to know them, I can then choose to improv as them. Yeah. But do you still think it's quite important for actors who want to do comedy to have some form of improv experience?
Yeah, I think yes, I do, Sam. I think it's really important. Like, comedy is very live, okay? And when I say that, I mean just moment by moment, whatever's going on between you and the other actor is going on between both of you and the audience at the same time, and you can't lie about it. So if you had worked out how a gag might kind of land or the timing of a moment or whatever, and the night before it played a certain way, but tonight if you try to play that rhythm and the audience feels any sense of disconnect, like if they're watching you and they see the technique behind it, they might know that's what they're looking at, but there'll just be a sense of them not quite being in it with you. And comedy is so about bringing everyone into the room, it's that beautiful thing that happens when you see a performance and you feel as though when something lands, everything inside you thinks that's exactly what should have happened at that moment. And it's not as if you're in any way ahead of the action where you saw it coming. It's just it delivers this enormous sense of satisfaction based on true clarity that led up to that moment, yeah? Whereas when there's disconnection, you might hear a few people in the audience laugh and other people will be confused and go, I kind of get that that's meant to be funny, but it didn't quite ring true to me. So improvisation really puts you very much in the moment. And the way I like to think it's Rowena Balos said this, if you freak out within the form, that is, you're playing with each other with a sense of anarchy, but the structure, and the shape of the scene has been highly worked out, exactly where the beats hit, the build comes to here and this is where the laugh is, it's all about hearing that gap and then I turn here, the form, the shape, what you're working within, but the way in which you engage has to be incredibly live. And so therefore, if you consider that every night you go out there to perform, you are improvising or you are kind of playing it with a sense of you have no idea what your character's going to do or where they could go. And then stuff's truly exciting. And I see it all the time as an audience. When I sit in a show, I see people go, oh, you really like that choice because it's obviously worked for you up to this moment. But if you play it and I feel that it's ancient history, or you're pulling a face or doing a move because, you know, you generally get the audience laughing at you, I feel a sense of disconnect, you know, and I sit there being a bit confused. Whereas when I'm right in it with someone, you know, and I think, wow, this person is just there in the moment. And comedy is all about surprise. So you know, even the actors have to surprise one another. You have to engage on that level of surprise. You know, one of the best actors I work with, William Zappa, who I've done a few shows with. He's one of the most mercurial actors to be on stage with. You just look into each other's eyes and going, where are you going to go tonight, mate? How far, you know, how far are you going to push this moment? And there's that sense of almost as if the actors are saying, I'm going to make you laugh from within my character, within the ridiculous nature of my choice. And if that game's going between the actors, you can guarantee it's going to the audience as well. You know, there's a sense of frisson going on there. Yeah,
that's great to work with someone so generous in willing to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, someone just open, someone who looks at you going, look, I know my shit and what I'd like to do here, but I'm looking across the space to see how you are going to change me. And if you're both doing that for one another, then it's the most wonderful sense, as opposed to someone trying to hijack a moment or milk a moment, you know, sit on it and wait for that audience to laugh and then go off the peak and then die down and, you know, thinking, oh, I'm still enjoying. There's a couple of people laughing out there. It's like, fucking no. As soon as you hit that peak, you got to shut that crowd down and get on with it. Make them feel as though that you know, they're in stitches where they're putting their hand over their mouth and they're trying not to laugh because they want to hear what you say. You know, that's all part of the great commerce of you know, when I teach comedy, I talk about in all my research of comedy, you know, I came across the Comos festival, which is an ancient Greek festival, drunken festival, where they would sacrifice sheep and then rip their guts out and then tuck all the blood and offal and crap inside the stomach bag of the sheep until it was really tight like a soccer ball, and sew it up, and then they'd stitch these or tie these big soccer ball phalluses and boobies onto their bodies, get really drunk and charge each other in the town square and smash into each other until these sheepskins would spew forth blood, shit, and offal, and they'd roll around laughing. That's where comedy comes from. And there's in that there's a tension, you know. There's this skin that is trying to hold in this lifeblood, this anarchy. And we always have to have that tension, whether it's between my own character's dilemma with my flawed interior and my external behavior, whether it's with the other actor or the other character in a space and our different worldviews, whether it's within the situation where everything's going wrong around me, you know, and I'm feeling everything around me, and with the audience, the same thing is if I let that audience have their full laugh until they exhaust themselves, or I let the show stretch and let all this air into it, then it becomes indulgent. Whereas I'm keeping it really tight and the commerce is rich, then the audience kind of, in a way, becomes a distraction from where the story's at, you know, and there's a wonderful sense of the audience feels as though, oh, they don't even really need me anymore. You know, this story is just playing the way it will play. I'm laughing, I'm in it, but I'm not controlling the rhythm of the show, you know. The performers are controlling the rhythm of the show, and the audience is being schooled in how to get in, get out, get in, get out. It's all part of the bigger picture, yeah.
Yeah.
I get a bit obsessed about this stuff.
It's great. It's great. I know we can talk to you all day. It's fascinating. You know, just to be able to stop as busy up and coming actors, you know, trying to land any sort of part. It's great every now or then to stop and actually have a decent think, no matter what your background is, formal training or informal or whatever, to be able to just sit and have a chat about what it is that you do and what it means. I think it's fantastic and very rewarding. Is there advice that you wish someone had given you when you started out?
Actually, I did get some great advice. I was on probation, I think, for my first 2 years at NIDA, and Kevin Jackson sat me down he was the head of acting back then, and Kevin Jackson's still teaching out there at the Hub, and he's amazing. He really is an extraordinary resource of theatre and ideas and playwrights and all the rest of it, and acting. And I thought he was a great teacher. And he said to me, I had a good mate of mine who I won't name, who was very handsome, and we used to he didn't have to try too hard. He just looked great. You know what I mean? Whereas I was the ugly duckling, and I was the youngest in my year, and he said to me, you can't run like this other fella. He'll get straight onto TV. He's fine. He's got chiseled jaw and this and that. He said, you don't have that going for you. You're going to have to work a lot harder if you want any chance to success. And that really did stick in my head. From that day on, I went, okay, right. So in order for me to have any success, I have to seize every opportunity, and I have to work as hard as I can. I can't drift through this thing and think it's somehow a bludge. It requires an enormous amount of research and discipline and focus and commitment and all the rest of it. So I think some people come to this job thinking somehow or other, run into people at the time saying, oh yeah, I could have been an actor. And it's like, really could you get on stage and perform at that level 8 times a week for 9 months and not miss a show, even when you're food poisoned, you know what I mean, and you got buckets in the wings? Could you get up there and still try to deliver that same performance? Could you learn those lines for 6 months on a 20-week shoot, every night, sleeping with 6 hours at night sleep? There's an enormous amount of discipline and work in order to stay relevant, to stay working, I think.
It's hard because people sort of only really see the success, so they don't understand or there's so much going on behind that.
Yeah. When I did Harrow, and I was, Yohan Griffin, who was playing the lead, just watching him week in, week out, he's in pretty much every scene. And, he's on set, he's getting picked up at dark every morning. He's on set, just, every scene, all this really full-on medical speak and, 7-syllable words. And in between bits, he's kind of eating juice bars and, drinking water just to sustain him, to keep him going. And then he gets through till 7 o'clock at night, and they get him home, and he's got to learn lines again for the next day. And he's up till, 10 o'clock, just kind of trying to cram lines, and then up again in the morning after 5 hours sleep. And he did that for 22 weeks, And so Friday nights, he would learn Friday nights, big chunks of the speeches for the next week's work. And then Saturday night, he'd give himself a night out, But he'd last a couple of hours and he'd be exhausted because his body was so run down. But you don't see it when you're looking at him on screen.
Well, you're always busy across television and film and the theatre. Is there something you're working on at the moment that you can share, or something coming up for you? What am I doing? I've got an episode on Upright 2, Tim Minchin's awesome show. Yeah, that was great. I love that one. Yeah. So that's about to start shooting up here in Queensland, where I live now, very soon. And I've just landed a lovely episode on Paddy Bramble and Harriet Dyer's new comedy show, Colin from Accounts, which is Foxtel Binge, I believe. Easy Tiger are the production company there. And then I've also got a pretty good role on Nautilus, which is a big Disney epic that's being shot at Movie World up here all year. So it's 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea kind of Captain Nemo story. But so it's 10 massive kind of episodes. Put your bathers on and get ready to get wet. Do you have to hold your breath for a length of time and that sort of stuff? Is it... Well, they do. It's funny because, at the beginning of every gig, they always send you through the costume measurement form, and you've got to fill out your hat size and your glove size. And Judgment Day. I call it Judgment Day, but yeah. Yeah. It gets weird. It gets weird, but this time it's sort of like wetsuit size now. I mean, who knows their wetsuit size, really, unless you're a surfer, Tight, I guess.
midi tight.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that'll be fun. Yeah, I was actually down there yesterday doing a wardrobe fit for Upright down at Movie World, and I went through past all the builds for Nautilus, and all the massive sets and green screens and water tanks. It's going to be super fun. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
And then I'm going to do a play at the end of the year. I'm going to do the Caretaker, Pinter's Caretaker down at the Ensemble, which is something I'm very excited about, working with Ian Sinclair again, who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf with, and Our Town for STC. So I'll get a chance to get in a room with that brilliant mind again and work on a brilliant play.
Fantastic.
Awesome.
Fantastic. Well, thanks again for your time today, Darren. You've been very generous with us. We do appreciate it.
No worries.
Wherever you're listening to your podcast, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss more tips and tricks for actors. I'm Max.
I'm Sam.
And you hear us next week.
Two unemployed actors.